Central California, San Ynez Valley, Central Coast, has long been recognized as the apex of the vaquero culture. This is ground zero, kind of the Tigris and Euphrates of the vaquero culture. And the origin of it really came after the secularization of the missions. And the vaqueros who worked on the mission lands, these men were able to utilize those skills. They had absolutely incredible environment of rolling hills. And the one thing that we all miss today, time. It enabled them to perfect their skills, to be able to work the cattle efficiently, and more importantly for this discussion, start to focus on the gear that they used that would enable them to do it even better. Tom, tell us a little bit about how that California stock saddle came about.
Yeah, I think when you look at a collection like this today, is that the origin of the California stock saddle is always important to talk about because of the way that these saddles evolved, and I think it's important to think that most of these cowboys that rode these saddles bought the best gear that they could with the money that they had because this is how they lived.
Okay, so this first saddle right here was made by, it is attributed that it was made by Edward Brain. And Brain had a history of making miniature gear. So there's very few examples of saddles that he actually made for riding. This little oak pattern that he put on this, we're kind of assuming that this was done in the 20s, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think if you look at the horn, the way the horn's made, like Loomis made them, and the way the cantle is in the back, and the stirrups tied into the tree that way, sure.
And he wrapped the cantle with rawhide, which is insanely hard to do. You have to, it's literally skin. So you're trying to wrap something wet and get it around here. So there's a lot of skill that's involved in what he did. There's a brand on the back of the cantle, the Wani Lolita brand. So we're assuming that either he made this for Jack Mitchell or it was a gift to Jack Mitchell at some point. But he really did a very nice job on this, and obviously it's been written, so it worked.
This Art Hugenberger saddle, Art Hugenberger worked for Jedlicus, and he was the second saddle maker that they had. Jedlicus started their shop in '32 and didn't start making saddles till the '40s. So, and this is pretty classic. This is one that he made here in San Ynez.
Silver was probably, it's very reminiscent of Keaston Brothers silver with the embossed rope edge on the horn cap and the saddle string conchos. There's a nice addition of a fitted saddlebag, whether it's to haul a sandwich in or doctoring equipment for cattle. It fits the saddle. It looks like it was added a little later, but if he didn't do the carving, whoever did a real nice job matching it.
Yeah, it all matches, with the saddlebags and all the rest. And we always have to look at, the silver that's on saddles, that were made during this era and later on that they bought from a house that made, different silver rather than making any of their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, this one was owned by a local cowboy, Jim Carr, who worked on a number of ranches. We don't know exactly who made this. There's no mark on this. What era, Tom, do you think this?
Yeah, no maker stamp at all. We've been over the saddle pretty much. It got used.
The rivets of his jeans, his Levi's, it's obviously ridden because you can see the wear on the cantle, but it obviously really served him well. They all have personalities.
Yeah.
And you end up seeing that, especially after they've had years and years of use.
Yeah. And we get into this Visalia saddle here that was here in San Ynez.
Well, bucking rolls are sort of quasi-insurance policies to hope they keep you in.
The way that it's all made, this is pretty much Visalia, and there is a stamp on the back, of Visalia stamp with a stock number pretty much lower than anything I've seen. So this has been around a while. It's an older saddle for sure.
And you see the way the horn's wrapped. I mean, this is a big post horn. These are all, this is the area where dally roping really started to happen, and you can see that this saddle had this horn had some pretty good dallies taken on it, so I bet there's some stories going on with this one.
Yeah, there might have been some replacement done on some of this, a little bit of work done on it, but nothing that deteriorates the value of the saddle or the provenance on it.
Okay, let's move over to the Loomis.
Yeah, this is a Sherman Loomis saddle, and Sherman Loomis made saddles in Santa Barbara County for up until about 1890s. His children made saddles after he had died, and then the shop was sold to the Tomlinson brothers. But more importantly, when you look at a saddle like this, it's made by Loomis, and these are quite collectible today. Trying to date them and find out when they were actually made, because of course there's no historical information available, but there is one little tale that we talk about, is that the stamp hit the ground one time and a chunk of the maker stamp came out of it, and they didn't reproduce it. They just kept using it. So there's saddles that you see today that part's gone. So when I see a Loomis saddle, that's mostly what I look at. But this was made for Jack Mitchell, Devani Lolita, and you know, it's a really, really nice saddle.
This is one of the crown jewels of the museum's collection here. This is what we would end up calling a marriage saddle, meaning that the silver was married to the saddle, most of it after it was already made. The cantle strip was put on, the horn silver was put on. I really don't think the gullet silver was put on at the original. It was added. The conchos are very unusual. They don't match the other silver. The leaves that are on the back and the singular concho at the center of the cantle may have come from some piece of decorative silver or serving dish, which was very common back then. And then the big question are the two flowers that are on the inside of the cantle. These probably were added at the point where the saddle was placed in somebody's den as a decorative piece or as a collectible, because nobody's going to ride a saddle with this silver on it with all these sharp edges. It'd tear up your pants, and the silver would last maybe one branding season, if that, but nobody's going to take a dally on that horn. But the main point about so many of the Loomis saddles, and Tom, you have one at the Carriage Museum in Santa Barbara, the trees that he used, you could put those on horses today and ride them. Unlike a lot of the older saddles where horses were much narrower backed and had much sharper withers. But this is really a pretty incredible saddle. Let's look at this Bolen over here.
So this is a Bolen saddle, Bill. Why don't you give us a little information that you have on it?
Well, Edward H. Bolen was certainly, arguably, one of the more famous saddle makers. He made over 10,000 saddles in his lifetime, and he's always associated with silver, quote, parade saddles. And he only made 10% of those 10,000 had any kind of silver on them at all. So these are very, very unique. And this was made for Jack Mitchell, late 20s. These saddles were absolutely the pride and joy of Jack Mitchell, and it of course has his ranch's brand, the Juan y Lolita brand, on the back. These pommel caps were all hand done, and the ability to keep these stiff behind them, it's stuffed with horsehair, so that it has a little amount of give to it. But Bolen was one of the true masters in this type of saddle making. Now we got a Visalia too. Tell us a little bit about this Visalia.
This is truly the prize of the collection here. Visalia made an awful lot of parade type saddles like this. This is called a sunburst saddle by the down here on the skirt. You see that sunburst silver on there. But what's really interesting about when you look at a lot of these Visalia saddles, everything's here. Although the strings are missing, but nobody's tried to replace them, and that's really a kind of a deal that you don't want to do on a saddle like this, because it just ruins them when you go through and try to put new pieces on them and make them look like they were originally. You're better off doing them alone, but this is just truly a masterpiece. And
one thing about this silver saddle, you can tell it was used, as Tom just said about the saddle strings. These things are designed to kind of have a little give to them. If you get hung up somewhere with something you've got tied onto the back of your saddle, in many cases it could be a slicker or anything, you want to have a give point so that the horse doesn't fall or you're not injured. So even though this has got probably some of the most glorious silver and that we see on these silver saddles. And this silver, Visalia utilized a number of smiths, including the Shazline Company out of San Francisco, and which is still operating today with the grandson Rob Shazline. But these are really classic Visalia type ponchos, the bull on the swell caps, the bucking horse on the horn cap, and this whole sunburst pattern. This is probably one of the most beautiful cannel pieces I've ever seen, and it goes to the taste of Jack Mitchell to create not only the bowline saddle we looked at earlier, but this saddle. In this one, he also incorporated the long tapaderos at the bottom. These are about 18 inches, and if you talk to saddle makers, the thing they hate making more than belts are tapaderos, because it's like gutting a fish. You have to open them all up. So if it's 18 inches on one side, that means it's 3 feet that they're trying to wrangle to get wrapped around the stirrup. So this is really a fabulous example of the saddle maker's art as well as the silversmith's art. We hope you've enjoyed this look at some of the collection here at the San Ynez Valley Historical Museum. It represents a group of saddles that we've tried to focus on the origin and continuation of the vaquero culture in this region. These saddles were owned by long-thinking individuals who loved the horseback life and who loved what these saddles represented. And Tom, I know you've got special favorites here, but what are some of the aspects of these saddles that really tickle you?
Well, I think when you look at the entire collection, we were talking earlier about the origin of the California stock saddle, and this is more representative of maybe the 19th century, with the exception of the Loomis, which is much older. But the San Ynez Museum has done a wonderful job of preserving the collection, and having a collection like this today is just outstanding.